Puntland's deportations, legal violations, and the responsibility of said Abdullahi Deni. The ongoing deportation of immigrants and Somali citizens from Puntland, mainly targeting Ethiopians, Syrians, Yemenis, and Rahanweyn Somalis from the southwest state, represents a grave violation of legal and human rights. These groups have reportedly faced public violence, harassment, and forced removal, often without any legal justification or due process. Instead of preventing these abuses, Puntland security forces have actively facilitated expulsions, responding to public hostility rather than upholding the rule of law. Even more troubling is the inaction, and arguably complicity, of the Puntland administration under the leadership of said Abdullahi Deni. His government has failed to take measures to curb xenophobic violence, creating an environment where ethnic persecution is tolerated and, in some cases, encouraged. Despite Puntland's decision to sever ties with the federal government of Somalia, it remains bound by national and international laws that guarantee fundamental rights to all individuals, including migrants and internally displaced persons, IDPs. Deni's failure to uphold these obligations violates Somalia's legal framework and raises the prospect of criminal responsibility under international law. His government's inaction in preventing ethnic violence and mass expulsions renders him complicit in human rights violations, a stance that aligns with historical legal precedents regarding state responsibility. Deni's responsibility and failure to act. Said Abdullahi Deni, as the leader of Puntland, bears the ultimate responsibility for his administration's actions. His government has not only failed to prevent ethnic persecution but has actively enabled it by allowing the security forces to engage in unlawful deportations and disregarding rising xenophobic violence. The most damning aspect of Deni's leadership is his deliberate inaction in the face of widespread human rights abuses. Instead of intervening to protect vulnerable communities, his administration has allowed public hostility to dictate state policy, resulting in unlawful expulsions that target ethnic and national minorities. The fact that these deportations have occurred under his watch, without any meaningful attempts to prevent them, signals either a reckless disregard for human rights or a calculated political strategy to appease nationalist sentiments within Puntland. Deni's failure to act is even more egregious when viewed in the context of Puntland's legal obligations. Despite Puntland's autonomy, it is still bound by the Somali constitution and international treaties that prohibit ethnic discrimination and forced deportations. By ignoring these obligations, Deni is violating legal statutes and betraying the fundamental principles of justice and human dignity. State complicity in human rights violations, the Nuremberg precedents. The Nuremberg trials, 1945 to 1946, established key legal precedents regarding state complicity in human rights violations, many of which directly apply to the Puntland government's actions under Deni. Three principles, in particular, highlight the extent of Deni's legal and moral responsibility. 1. Command responsibility. Leaders are criminally liable if they fail to prevent or punish human rights abuses committed under their authority. By allowing his security forces to facilitate mass deportations, Deni has neglected his duty as Puntland's head of state. 2. State complicity. Governments knowingly allowing persecution without intervention are legally responsible for the violations. Deni's failure to stop or even condemn ethnic violence makes his administration complicit in these crimes. 3. Crimes against humanity. Systematic persecution of ethnic or social groups, even when committed by non-state actors, can amount to crimes against humanity. If Puntland continues these deportations and ethnic removals, Deni and his government risk facing prosecution under international law. These principles highlight the grave consequences of Deni's inaction. His administration is not merely neglectful, it is enabling human rights violations through a combination of indifference, political opportunism, and direct participation in illegal expulsions. Conclusion: Deni's inaction is a crime in itself. Said Abdullahi Deni's failure to act in the face of xenophobic violence and illegal deportations is not merely a political miscalculation, it is a fundamental breach of legal and moral responsibility. His administration's inaction has allowed human rights abuses to flourish, rendering Puntland complicit in ethnic persecution. Under international legal norms, the principle of command responsibility dictates that a leader is liable for their direct actions and failure to prevent crimes committed under their jurisdiction. Deni has demonstrably failed in this regard. His government has failed to prevent ethnic violence despite clear evidence of rising hostility towards migrants and Rahanweyn Somalis, permitted security forces to engage in unlawful deportations, ignoring Somalia's constitutional protections for its citizens, encouraged a political climate where xenophobia thrives rather than promoting the rule of law and human rights. Deni's refusal to take meaningful action exposes Puntland to legal consequences under both Somali and international law. If Puntland continues these illegal expulsions, he and his administration risk prosecution for crimes against humanity. The world has seen time and again that leaders who fail to act against persecution do not escape accountability. Whether through domestic legal action or international criminal tribunals, justice eventually catches up with those who choose inaction over responsibility. If Deni does not change course, he may find himself answering for these crimes before an international court. Thanks for watching. Abdullahi Mohodin Hassan Abdullahi Yabro has prepared this program. He is a master of law, legal researcher, scholar, and international legal advisor. Until next time, stay curious.